Hello, hello? See? I told you wouldn't have any problems. Did you use the Foxy's hook yet? Probably not. I was just curious. Like I said, it was always my favorite. They tried to nerf Foxy, you know. They thought the first version was too strong, so they nerfed it to be more noob-friendly, to keep the less skilled players happy, you know. But players these days just can't keep up. The devs literally had to buff Foxy's hook back up a few patches ago. So eventually they stopped trying and left it as is, a less consistent clown bottle add-on. Now it's just okay. I think players refer to it as just M1 trap. Hey, before I go, I wanted to ease your mind about any rumors you might have heard lately. You know how these community rumors come and go and seldom mean anything. I can personally assure you that whatever is going on with the game, however insane it may be, has nothing to do with our game. It's just all rumors and speculation. People trying to make a buck, you know. Our content creators during the week have reported nothing unusual, and they are on watch at all times. Okay, well anyway, hang in there, and I'll talk to you in the rest of the video.
Foxy's Hook, the obligatory haste add-on that a lot of killers seem to have at least one of. And it's had a few different versions, going from what some would call OP to not that great, to now in a state where I would say it's decent and honestly just good without being too oppressive. Its current version grants anyone who's in the Axis bubble 7% haste for 6 seconds. This includes the survivors, bringing them to 107% movement speed, and Springtrap to 122% movement speed as he becomes 115 after he throws the axe. A few points of note are that the effect doesn't start its timer until you leave the bubble, similar to a clown bottle, which means Party Hat basically makes it last longer, as well as having other uses with it that I'll get into a little bit later. Before we get into its more niche uses, I want to get into its general use case. On the PTB, as stated, a lot of people thought this add-on was OP, and while I kind of disagree to an extent, I understand where they were coming from. In essence, Foxy's Hook is just a mini clown yellow bottle for Springtrap. He throws his axe wherever he needs to, he walks through the bubble, he gets movement speed. The one downside to this is that unlike clown, you're trying to hit your axe on the survivor, so many times you will throw it towards the survivor, miss, and they will get the haste. Now, the thing with this is that if it's in a specific loop that you're currently with the survivor in, doesn't really matter too much. You're both getting the 7% haste, and technically speaking, you'll end the haste after they do and have it for like a couple seconds a little longer. But for the most part, the reason why a lot of people don't like this add-on is because it encourages Springtrap to miss. Now, I disagree with this because I think that's fundamentally part of Springtrap's entire design, is that sometimes you do want to miss, maybe for the Killer Instinct proc, maybe for the haste from Foxy's Hook, maybe from Chica's bib, things like that. But I really don't think it's really that badly designed, as Springtrap can also use this to his advantage in other ways, but for the most part, it just speeds up most of your chases by 7% in general, which, when I was talking about Celebrate Poster, was one of the things I enjoyed about that. The difference with this is that, one, it requires you to miss, and two, you have much more control over when it happens, and if used correctly, only you end up with the benefit. And that's where I think the skill expression comes from this. The one thing I'm not the biggest fan of with this add-on is that it kind of discourages you to go for orbitals. Because if you go for an orbital and miss, which it's an orbital, you're probably gonna miss, it means that the survivor gets 7% haste and can just run away. That is the other thing with this. It also discourages you from using it at blocked animation locations, such as windows and pallets, because if you do manage to miss them somehow or miscalculate, the survivor is going to get the haste, and then you're basically sitting there kicking the pallet, getting the haste afterwards. But in both of those scenarios, again, you're both getting the 7% haste, so you're catching up just as fast as you would have. Another cool thing you can do with this that I do often is you can throw it at a loop while you're in the loop, and once those 7 seconds are up, the survivor's about to cross through the bubble after you just recently have, maybe you double back or something like that, you can then recall the axe, get the 7% haste, and now you're 117%. So you're back up to 115. Now, before I go into some other niche techs, I do want to go into combos, because I always like talking about combinations with this, and one that I neglected to talk about in the Indo CPU video was Indo CPU.
Oh, that's good. I keep having this nagging feeling that I've forgotten something.
Hey, if you forgot it, it probably wasn't all that important.
Yeah, I guess.
Indo CPU makes it so that when you're in your bubble, and for 5 seconds after, you kick things 40% faster. Comboing this with Foxy's Hook, you kick the pallet 40% faster and get the 7% haste as you're running towards the survivor once this happens. It requires a little bit more setup, but in general, you can often use this in a way to catch up to the survivor extremely fast. If you combo this with something like Game of Foot and you happen to be chasing the Obsession, you also get another 7% haste. And it's kind of nuts how much haste stacking you can end up doing with this. Now, what I do want to mention about haste stacking is that there aren't very many haste perks, as you would think, especially on the killer side. There's like 3 viable ones and then a bunch of niche ones. And even the viable ones, such as Unbound, require you to land the hit. So unless you preset the axe up in such a way where you're going to get the hit and then you vault through the window anyways. And the other obvious combo is with Party Hat, like I mentioned earlier, since it makes the bubble bigger. It also means that you essentially get the haste for longer. The problem with Party Hat is that oftentimes it means that the survivor is also getting the haste. So you kind of make this zone where everyone is 7% faster. This can be a negative and a positive depending on the loop, depending on the situation. I do want to get a little bit later into the idea of how to run this at something like Shack and how I've mentioned in the past that Springtrap is more of an M1 killer who happens to M2, and Foxy so it kind of plays into that, which leads us into Save the Best for Last. Decent combo with this, as if you're not really landing your axe, then why not just go for an M1 build? Springtrap is definitely capable of it, and he can get around the map, so it's not the worst idea in the world. You can combo this with Rapid Brutality, which I actually would recommend, as you're throwing your axe so often, you're not getting the Bloodlust anyways. So you might as well do it. Restaurant Menu is an obvious one, as that means that you can get the axe back faster, essentially keep the haste more often. It should be noted that unlike Iridescent Coin, it doesn't last indefinitely. The timer doesn't line up, even with Restaurant Menu. So just keep that in mind. If they upped it to 7 or 8 seconds, it definitely would, but even then you have the recall time. It's really not worth buffing it in that way. The last combo is with Celebrate Poster, and the reason why I enjoyed comboing it with Celebrate Poster is that it means that hit or miss, you're getting the haste. Now, the survivor is getting the haste as well, but again, if you're throwing your axe at the survivor, there's a very high likely chance that they pick up the bubble and then keep going with the haste anyways. So it doesn't really matter too much. But if you like the haste or the fast feeling of it, I definitely recommend running these two together. Now, the general playstyle of Foxy's Hook, as stated before, is just to kind of throw your axe at your feet or slightly in front of you, similar to a yellow clown bottle. Use the haste to catch up to the survivor. You have to be very careful not to give it to the survivor, which there is a tech that allows you to not give it to the survivor. I call it the party trick because it requires Party Hat, but some people would call it height maxing because you're throwing the axe at a very high location, such as a wall or a tree, to where the bubble is big enough so it still touches Springtrap's head and he gets the effect, versus the survivor not getting the haste thing.
Well, nope, I hit the pig. Wait, hold on. Yeah, are you affected by this? Can you run through that? Did you get haste? No, you didn't. Wait, that's so good.
Now, is this viable? Kind of. Is it useful? Most definitely. Is it practical? That's the real question, and the problem with it is the practicality. Not only do you have to be at a loop that specifically has something for you to throw the axe above you to get this effect to happen, you also have to know exactly where to aim it, how far away to be to aim it, all of these other things, which you can get good with in practice. And while I do recommend learning a couple of them, I think a lot of indoor maps are very good for this if you happen to have Foxy's Hook on them. The maps that in general just have too many variables to make this a viable strategy to learn. I'm not saying don't go for it, but it is definitely something you can do. Something else that should be noted is that the 6 seconds that you get the haste, because of how it works, if you throw an axe at the bottom of a door, not at the door, but at the bottom of the door on the ground, when you go through the door and then come out the other side, you'll still retain some of the haste for about 2 to 3 seconds, depending on whether you're running streamers or not. What's really nice about this is it means that you can basically throw the axe at the floor, wait in the door, use something like Bonnie's guitar, and then once you get out of the door, you can then use that haste to your advantage in whatever way you feel fit. Another thing, and I brought up spring spots before, and something with this is that spring spots are interesting. Standing still mind games are always interesting to me. Some people fall for it, some people don't. The argument would often be made that good survivors don't fall for it because they'll hold their check spots. However, what I've learned in my about 2.5 years of doing standstill tech is that a lot of survivors, if they have a speed buff of any kind, will not stand still because they're trying to utilize the speed buff as best they can to get that distance. So a lot of times you can use Foxy's hook with the killer instinct proc from it to know if the survivor's running back into you at an even faster rate. Now, am I saying do this all the time? Of course not. Like I always say, if you're doing spring spotting, chuck spotting, head spotting for the new killer, you need to always vet the survivor and see if it's working and stop when it's not. Get spring spotted, Vittorio. Hello. Good bed hug. Bro, how many spring spots have I gotten in this match? Holy crap. Really, Steve? Really, Steve? Really, Steve? And he DC'd. But that's the other thing with Foxy's hook that I do want to bring up is that it does allow you to brute force a lot of things. I mentioned a minute ago that Springtrap, in my opinion, is more of an M1 killer who happens to M2, not an M2 killer who happens to M1. Now, what is the difference? I hear you probably asking. Maybe not. Who knows? The difference is that while the axe is extremely important and a core part of Springtrap's kit, landing it is not always the easiest, especially on a lot of loops. Cough, cough, shack. But a lot of the time, because of that, that's why Foxy's hook is very, very good. Because you can basically brute force any loop 7% faster. I brought this up a few times, and that's because I feel it's very important to utilizing Foxy's hook to the best of its ability. You can throw it at the corner of shack, so both of you end up getting it, so the vault block happens faster. You can throw it at the windows, so it just happens inherently faster. But again, it basically turns you into more of a run-down character. And if you combo it with CPU, like mentioned before, you can then combo this to basically become like a pseudo-singularity, not exactly, where you're rushing the survivors down at faster speeds and then breaking the pallet. It doesn't feel like Springtrap necessarily because you're playing him in a completely different way, but in my opinion, I think it's a much better way to do it. And again, something that I feel like an add-on should do is change how the playstyle works, especially a blue rarity one. It'd be weird if there was also a green rarity one that doesn't really add anything to the gameplay of any sense, and it's just kind of there to do what it does.
Dennis, calm down! Don't you tell me to calm down. There's that chirping again! How are you not hearing that? Newsflash, asshole! I've been hearing it the entire goddamn time! Then why wouldn't you say something? Because I hate you! Oh.
Now, is Foxy's hook the super amazing OP add-on? This is a weird case, because unlike some other ones, it really does depend on you. If you think that you're not very good at landing your axes, I would recommend learning, but if you think you're not very good at landing your axes, or you're not seeing much use in the axe like on its own, I highly, highly, highly recommend Foxy's hook. It is definitely in, I would say, in his top 5. There's a reason for this. Again, the utility it provides is universally good. Even if it works on the survivor, as long as you're not dumb about it, you can make use out of this yourself as well. And unlike some other add-ons like Chica's Bib or Iridescent Remnants or Freddy's Hat, it's not extremely situational. There aren't very many matches where you're kind of hurting yourself by bringing this, or it's only good in this specific situation. And on top of that, much like a lot of his add-ons, you can kind of build around it. You can add another haste effect in there. You can do aura reading like I'm all ears, so you can use the haste to like kind of sneak up on people around corners. You can use it with discordance, you can use it for general map traversal, you can use it for going through doors. Foxy's hook has a lot of utility, and I don't think it really needs to be adjusted. I think the last adjustment they did to it was perfectly fine. It gives it synergies with the doors, it makes it so that the haste isn't too unnoticeable, and it helps it combo with many other things, like I mentioned earlier, CPU and Party Hat. But as always, let me know what you guys think. I know Foxy's hook is kind of, I don't want to say divisive, but it's definitely one that people have a lot of mixed opinions on, especially after the changes it's gone through, since it has gone through 3 of those changes. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one. Yeah, bye.
Subscribe, damn it. I'll be back. I always come back, and so should you, you moron.